All right, so last week we talked about the difference between apportionment, reapportionment, and redistricting. Will everybody please close your eyes? No peeking. You're peeking at me, peeking at you, so stop peeking. Okay, so first things first, what do we call it when we divvy up the number of seats each state gets in the House of Representatives? That's apportionment. And what causes reapportionment? Population change, right? So when population change occurs, that prompts reapportionment. Who is in charge of reapportionment? Which government? The national government is in charge of reapportionment, right? Population changes, they decide how many seats each state's going to get. Now, what do the states have the job to do? Redistricting, very good. And redistricting is what? The boundaries for congressional district. Does redistricting affect the U.S. House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate? Why? Because the Senate is at large, right? They're statewide offices. There are no districts. Okay. Now there are two Supreme Courts that deal with the practice of redistricting: Baker versus Carr and Reynolds versus Sims. Now in both of them, did the Supreme Court say that you do or you don't have to redistrict? Oh, you're giving me faces. Did we not do Reynolds versus Sims in this class? Okay, good. Well, we did Baker versus Carr, so we'll start there. In the U.S., in Baker versus Carr, did the U.S. Supreme Court say that you do or you don't have to redistrict every 10 years? You do. And what was the principle established by that Baker versus Carr ruling? One man, one vote. And what is that percentage? 1% difference in the largest and the smallest districts. Okay, you can open your eyes. Good job. So we will add then that one remaining Supreme Court case. So Baker versus Carr was that one man, one vote that dealt with U.S. congressional districts. But a few years after that, the Supreme Court heard a case that dealt with state legislative districts. So not like for the U.S. Congress, this is just for state office. And this case was Reynolds versus Sims, and the Supreme Court basically said the same thing. You do have to redistrict every 10 years. You have to make sure that populations are relatively equal. The difference is that in Reynolds versus Sims, that threshold for how different the districts can be is bigger. This is not a federal office, so the federal government didn't feel like they could tell the states as much what they could do. So the Reynolds versus Sims allows a 10% difference between the largest and the smallest districts in the state. So this is for state legislatures, 10% difference. Right, so because Texas, for example, only has 36 districts for U.S. House of Representatives, but we have, I don't know, 90, I literally am making this up, more than that for the state, for our U.S., or excuse me, for our Texas state legislature. So the districts aren't the same because they have different numbers of them. Yes? No, because who's in charge of reapportionment? The national government, right? So the national government tells us how many U.S. congressional districts we get, and we draw the right number of districts to suit them. Okay, so that's all about apportionment and districting. But apportionment and districting are essentially inseparable from the idea of gerrymandering. So here's the word gerrymandering, if you need to know how to spell it. And this little picture over here is a modern, depiction of a 1790s political cartoon. So in the 1790s, there was a U.S. representative from Massachusetts by the name of Eldridge Gerry. Aren't you glad your name isn't Eldridge? You wish. Okay, good. Well, so Eldridge Gerry was a U.S. representative from Massachusetts, and during his time in office, the state of Massachusetts redrew his district to make it easier for him to be reelected. Okay? And this is what it looked like, well, minus the wings and the claws and the eyes. So you can see these sort of counties here around the area, these regions, that made up his district. So a political cartoonist who thought this was pretty corrupt to draw a district to influence the outcome of an election, added the wings and the claws and the whatever, and he titled his cartoon The Gerrymander. Gerry is an Eldridge Gerry, and mander like salamander. So this is a gerrymander, this creature that has been created. And the name sort of stuck. So if I had to define gerrymandering, or, if you had to define gerrymandering, on an FRQ, or something? Maybe what I would say is this. Gerrymandering is the drawing of U.S. congressional districts. Actually, we strike the word U.S. The drawing of congressional district lines. Gerrymandering is the drawing of congressional district lines in order to create an advantage politically. Gerrymandering is the drawing of district lines, congressional district lines, in order to create a political advantage or to create an advantage politically. Now, the Supreme Court has reviewed many cases about gerrymandering because I don't know about you, but it sounds a little bit corrupt. Yep. And the Supreme Court has repeatedly found that, corrupt or not, gerrymandering is completely and 100% allowed, 100% constitutional, so long as it is only on the basis of party or socioeconomic status. The only time gerrymandering is not allowed is if it's done on the basis of race. So we can't gerrymander to help more white people get elected than black people or whatever. We can't gerrymander on the basis of race. But we can gerrymander with the full support of the U.S. court system on the basis of party lines or on socioeconomic status. Never mind that partisanship and socioeconomic status tend to be highly tied to race. You can do it, yes. Well, because there's nothing that makes it illegal. That the parties in power, there's no constitutional precedent that says that the districts can't be, that the states don't have the power to draw the districts the way they want to. So the parties that are in power get that ability. Oh yeah, all the time, everywhere. Equally as rampant in Republican and then Democratic-controlled states. We'll talk about Texas because we are in Texas, and Texas is controlled by the Republicans, so the Republicans are doing the gerrymandering in Texas. But I promise you that in California, the Democratic Congress in California is gerrymandering. Massachusetts has, gerrymandering is everywhere. It is not unique because, of course, gerrymandering means that once a political party gains a majority in the state legislature, they can redraw district lines to make sure that they keep the majority in the future. They can make it much harder for their opponents to ever, be competitive. So even when you have even if we have a state that is basically 50-50 split between Republicans and Democrats, whoever gains control of the legislature during the census year, so for example, this is 2016, in 2020, the next presidential election year, I encourage you, I won't be your teacher anymore, but I encourage you to pay attention to the state races, because that will be the year that the legislatures are elected that will get to draw the lines after the 2020 census. Those people elected will have the power over the 2020 census. It'll be a really big deal. So that will be really important, because whoever has control over the state legislature, when the census comes out, they get to draw the districts however they want to, and they can make it very difficult for their opponents to sort of come back. So, and it's perfectly legal. Now, the Supreme Court has a couple of rules about drawing districts, and I want you to sort of giggle at a few of them. The one that is not giggleable is the Baker versus Carr standard, or the Reynolds versus Sims standard. This population difference, they do have to be equal in population, right? Within 1% or within 10%. Rule number one, equal in population, that is not negotiable. So it's an easily verifiable, you can either say that you are or you aren't, and the court will not uphold any districts that fall outside of that population range. The second big requirement from the Supreme Court, and here's where you can do your giggle. I told my students to put their winky faces in their notes. Because the next requirement says that the districts have to be compact. What does that mean, compact? Can you show me with your hands what compact looks like? Right? Kind of all bundled up in a ball or in a square, or something all squished together. But pull out your winky faces. Because this is probably the most infamous congressional district in the country. This is in North Carolina. And this has passed the Supreme Court's test for being compact. Yes, the black part is all one district. Yes, the black part is the district. So, no, it's a highway. We'll talk about that. Compact. The next rule, so the third rule, another one you need your winky faces for, is that districts must be contiguous. What does that word contiguous mean? Touching, not separated, right? You can see my picture over here. If this was the state of Tennessee, you can't have, well, this little blob and that little blob are all part of the same district. That would not be contiguous. They're not touching the whole way through. But again, here's time for your giggles. This district in North Carolina, and this is not that unusual. This is one of the most infamous districts, but there are lots of them that look just like this, many in Texas. But anyway, so these narrow portions here and here and here and here and right there and right there and right there, those are only as wide as the highway. So basically this district goes, here's a city, here's a city, here's a city, and groups them all together. And that's legal. They let that happen. So districts have to be equal in population. That one really matters. They have to be compact-ish. And they have to be contiguous, at least technically so. Right. So those are the rules for districting. Yes. They apply both for the U.S. Congress and for state districts. Just that the equal population rule is just a little bit different in terms of the 1% versus 10 at the state level. So the three rules: equal in population, compact, and contiguous. But again, those last two are a little bit we have to kind of squint our eyes to accept that. So what happens when we gerrymander? Well, there are two basic methods for gerrymandering. The first one is packing, and the second one is cracking. And they're kind of fun to say, packing and cracking. Not sure what it sounds like we're doing, but packing and cracking it is. So they're both used really commonly. It kind of depends on the situation for which one we're going to use. Packing is used most often if there is a really large political minority. So you can't ignore them. They're going to have to get some kind of say. You can't keep them having a say. There's more of them than you can dilute. So packing, a good example of packing is what happens in Texas along the border. So you guys know that South Texas is really Democratic, right? Especially compared to the rest of the country, or the rest of the state. This is Texas, country, same business. Anyway, okay, so although the Republicans control the Texas legislature, there's no way they're going to be able to create districts in South Texas that are going to elect Republican leaders. They just can't. There's just way too many Democrats in that part of the state. So what they do is they pack all the Democrats they can into each district in South Texas. What that means is that, yeah, sure, the Democrats are going to elect a few representatives from those areas, but all of those border areas, and by border I mean the areas between South Texas and say here in the really conservative central part of the state, those border areas now are Republican districts. So for example, I'm from close to Corpus Christi, and although the population where I'm from is pretty diverse, there's a really significant Latino population, they almost always vote Republican. And if we had been combined with the county south of us, then our district would have been a Democratic district. There are a lot of Democrats in the county south of us. But the county south of us was not grouped with us. It was grouped 150 miles south with the border counties to pack all the Democrats they could into one district. So packing, it's going to kind of do like this. We stick all the Republicans in one district in this example, and then that means the Democrats can maintain a majority, right? They can deny effect. They can deny a majority to this other party. Interestingly, packing can allow us to take a state that has a majority. If by some miracle, let's say the Democrats were to gain control of the Texas legislature, they could use packing, and depending upon what the breakdown looks like, in some states packing is used to deny a group that has a majority, a population majority, control of the legislature, so packing can be really effective. And then there's cracking, which is kind of the opposite. So this one happens when the political minority is smaller, and this is the way to deny the political minority any influence at all. So this second picture over here with the pink and the blue shows cracking. In this case, the districts were drawn horizontally, and that means that although 1/3 of the population was Republican in this little example, they get 0 seats. There's 3 seats, they get none of them, because we cracked their influence. We divided it up and diluted it, essentially. So packing and cracking are those two big methods. Okay, so I want you to try it. I'd like you to take out your whiteboards. And if you would draw in these three, they're all the same. don't draw the grids, just draw the letters, like without the lines between them. So there's 3 rows of 4, Republicans and Democrats, and see if you can draw each of these scenarios to have a majority Republican district, a majority Democratic, or a majority Republican legislature, majority Democratic legislature, and then an even split. All right, so here's the solution, or one possible solution. There are other ways to do it, but you can see here that even though in this fictional state, there's a perfectly even number of Republicans and Democrats, depending upon who controls the legislature, they can make it so that the Democrats are in charge of everything, the Republicans are in charge of everything, and so on. Now, this is a good time to remind you or to tell you, I don't think it's published yet, it's on there, but I don't think I've made it public. Over the holiday breaks, there will be an extra credit opportunity, Thanksgiving break, there'll be an extra credit opportunity for you to get involved in something called the redistricting game. It takes a long time, I'm going to kind of warn you, but if you're like me, you eventually get this sense of purpose, like you have to prove that you can beat it. And to get your points, and the instructions will be there, you'll have to beat 2 different levels. One will be just a plain old gerrymander, so you'll have to be a corrupt politician trying to get influence for your party. And then one will be an example of reform. This website is about, they want to reform the system, and so they have an example of what it would look like if it was different. So you'll have to do 2 of those. Please read the instructions carefully. Unlike some of the other games, like I don't know if some of you played the iCivics game. I don't know if I've offered one of those yet. There's no like clear like certificate at the end that shows that what you have done. So you need to get to the screen. There's an example in the instructions. You need to get to the screen that has 3 green check marks. And when you see 3 green check marks, that'll mean you finished and you were successful. You need to take a screenshot of that screen. And you're going to do it twice for the 2 different games. Make sure that your screenshot includes like the whole screen, because in the very top corner it'll tell me the name of the game you were playing so that I can make sure that you did the right ones, right? So if you choose to do it, it'll be over the break and then like the first couple of days after, in case like I'm going to be traveling the whole time. So that's your option, and we'll get started. I'll finish this up on Monday.